Hi, this is Ann Babson, your professor. I am contacting you through Moodle on video again to give you some background on the vindication of the rights of women, which you're reading in excerpted form. Mary Wollstonecraft writes this during the Enlightenment era in the late 1700s. She has already been a witness to the French Revolution. Um, she had written a book called The Vindication of the Rights of Man, referring to the right of people to overthrow an oppressive government, one that Americans cherish, surely. Um, but no one had in Europe for centuries talked about women's rights. The very notion of talking about rights specifically was very much in keeping with the time in which Mary Wollstonecraft lived. She actually ate dinner with Thomas Paine, who wrote Common Sense, which inspires the Declaration of Independence. She knows a community of thinkers who at their time were considered radical, and today we would just consider them political, not radical, political. But for her day, she was ahead of her time. And she decided to apply the same logic that the Enlightenment thinkers used to women. And this was radical at the time. It may still be radical today. Rousseau writes and influences people like Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson, and every patriot who fought in our war for independence from England. He wrote the following words: "Man is born free, yet everywhere he is in chains." Man is born free. Man is born free. No one thought that women could handle being free in the thinking group of revolutionary men. But women knew what it meant to be everywhere in chains, although that didn't always mean shackled slavery. Here are some rights that the women you know have that Mary Wollstonecraft would consider her wildest dream. Women can go to school. Women can make decisions about their health care in relationship with competent doctors who have learned things about the women's reproductive systems. The very idea that you could consult somebody who actually understood female anatomy as well as he would have understood male anatomy is important. Women have the right to be considered adults when they grow up. They are not considered wards of husbands, and later, if their husbands die, their sons. Women can own real estate. They have the right to own real estate. I want to tell you that I am not as old as the ancient world, but when I was born, the year I was born, if you were a married woman in the state of Georgia, you could not own real estate. If you had real estate, it belonged to your husband if you were married, because you effectively belonged to your husband. I am not so old that should be so. Women can vote. Voting was in and of itself a very new proposition in a place like France where the French Revolution was. Women can work and be treated as people who are competent to do work that is not, strictly speaking, work inside the home. Women can make decisions about their finances. Um, Even when my mother was a business owner on her own. And we are not talking about ancient history. We're talking about 50 years ago when she had just gotten out of law school and had enough money to rent an office to open up a private practice. And she couldn't get hired as a woman anywhere as anything other than a legal secretary. Literally. And by the way, that was true for the first woman Supreme Court Justice, Sandra Day O'Connor, as well. She graduated from a prestigious law school and they would not hire her because she was female to do anything other than type the letters of the quote unquote real lawyers. And so my mother was in a similar boat and she had money to rent and they would not rent to her to spend that money because she was a woman. And when she earned money from her law practice to go buy a car, the car dealership in town would not sell her a car because she was a woman. And he said, I will not sell you this car, even though you are willing to pay me cash. You're not even asking for credit unless I get your husband's signature on a piece of paper, because you are not qualified legally to make the decision to buy a car because you are a woman. When my mother, out of, again, a prosperous law practice, had plenty of money, applied for credit at a local department store. When I was about 10 years old, I remember her yelling at a store clerk who was supposed to process credit applications on a gender neutral basis by law, and said to her, no, we don't take ladies' applications for credit cards without their husbands present. The world used to be like that. I'm not saying you have it easy. In fact, in some ways, you have it harder. One thing my mother's generation didn't worry about so much was cellulite, was the perfect whiteness of teeth, was the idea that you have to be both smart and fit and fabulous and pretty and independent, yet not too independent, sexy, but yet not too sexy. I think your generation has some unrealistic expectations on women. That's just an outside observer looking in. You know your generation. I certainly will not live your lives for you. But I will say that these may become issues that you'll care to discuss among yourselves about equality. Um, I the idea that Mary Wollstonecraft had, that man is born free, yet everywhere he is in chains, might just apply to women who were considered literally the property of their husbands and sons and never free, was so mind-blowingly radical. Women were considered imbecilic, childlike for their entire lives by virtue of the fact that their bodies were different than men's. Then that made them stupid. I think men act at their peril where they underestimate the intelligence and skills of women. Just saying. And I want you to understand the world in which she was writing was one that was declaring liberation. Mary Wollstonecraft was considered among the most radical writers of her day. Today, she's just pleading for, women's education, the acknowledgement of our basic humanity and capacity to reason. And yet in those days, that was crazy talk. Crazy talk. I wanted you to hear this from me. I know I sound a little soapboxy, but oh my goodness, the struggle continues. The struggle is real. I let a person of color tell you about Olale Equiano on video because he was a remarkable man, and I'll speak to you about him in class. But I am a veteran of the gender battles. And I hope your generation resolves it all and that there is gender peace in our time. May it be so. Perhaps you are capable of this, but know that Mary Wollstonecraft paved a road for you to walk on. Know that other women who came after Wollstonecraft made that even imaginable. And I would exhort you to be grateful, not to me, but to those women way back there who yelled at store clerks, demanded the right to rent an office, who got to go to school for the first time when they were considered too stupid to know how to go to college, who were able, despite interdictions, to learn how to read, who fought for your right to vote. I know I'm preachy right now, but this is something that I say to you in respect, and I might even say in honor of the humanity of every male and female student that I'm talking to. Know that I am in earnest. I think that these writers that we're reading are here to instruct us about the possibilities of the future, not just the history of the past. So, enough preaching at you. Let me get off my soapbox now. I'll see you in class.